Okay, well, yeah, we last session here we left off kind of with me walking in the front door and being hired here. I had no preconceived notion about what Doane College was all about or anything. We just had needed a job, and this they were willing to pay me, and so that was where we were going. Um, and really, coming here was a blessing for me, although I didn't realize it right away. I think. Um, in two ways. Number one, it allowed me to the opportunity to work with a whole bunch of pretty talented kids. Before I came, 2 years before I came, 1959, Mr. Papik had recruited two of the best track athletes in the state of Nebraska. Clinton Skinner was a sprinter from Elsie, Nebraska, and Dean White, distance runner from Takema. And they were really the first people that we had that really were first class national level track and field athletes. And then and he followed that up with our first international. Came that next year in '61, and Peter Sura, East German escapee, and that's a whole other story that would take longer than we have to deal with. But Pete was an international level. He was on the East German national juniors team, and had some international experience in track and field, and was another level above what you normally would think that you would find at a college like this. So I had the opportunity to work and learn from those kinds of athletes, and believe me, I learned a lot more from them than they learned from me at that point. And then the second thing and most important was I had a mentor in Al Papik, and he was a fantastic coach. Just, you couldn't believe how great a coach he was. He taught you how not only how to coach, but how to win, and that was a big deal. And I had never separated the two in my mind, and as far as that was concerned. It was a period of time when I was just beginning to scratch the surface about what coaching was all about. And I had one idea going in, and what coaching was. I thought it was just teaching, the skills of running, jumping, and throwing. And I found out there was a lot more to it than that. And particularly the recruiting aspect of it, and finding the right pool of talent for your institution, for your program, for your coaches, based on, what can we do here at this place. And that probably was as big a jump as I had to make. I had no experience in recruiting at all, and the effect of good recruiting and the effect of bad recruiting. And Al spent a lot of time and effort to include me as an assistant coach in that effort. And so he took me along on all of his recruiting trips, or a lot of them, and so I would just learn by watching him, and what did he do right, and what did he do that was really important, and then pick his brain. And he was exceptionally good about dealing with his assistant coaches and including them into the whole big picture of what athletics was all about at that point in time. And he was the ultimate, I think, the ultimate mentor for any young coach to have. He's a great guy, and he was an excellent coach. He was a great friend. We we were next door neighbors for probably 10 years, and he always kept his yard mowed, and so you had to keep yours mowed. Anyway, the whole period of time from probably 1961 to 73 or so, that 11-year period, was really a learning period for me, not only from a coaching standpoint, but from a teaching standpoint. I was teaching classes that I had no clue what I was doing. I was barely staying one chapter ahead of the class in the textbook. And then, of course, I was involved in athletic training, which was part of my responsibility here. And being an athletic trainer in those days was, you were pretty much on your own. There wasn't such a thing as a team physician. And you did that from 3:30 to 4:30. You were the trainer, and from 4:30 to 6 o'clock or 6:30, you were the coach. And I didn't go to any of the football practices. They were on their own. It was a time when I think back about it. If we had been dealing with the legalistic kind of approach that we have today, where people are suing everybody over anything, that would have lasted 5 minutes. We were doing stuff in there that just you break into a cold sweat today thinking about it. It was a time when we had almost no equipment. We had a training room that was probably 10 by 15 or 10 by 12, cage, metal wire cage in Butler Gym in the back of the locker room. And you got, how locker rooms get, and steamy and stinky, and you just had a little corner of that as a training room. I think of some of the stuff we did. It was incredibly dumb, and it was the accepted way of doing things was pretty crude, to be honest about it. Then we moved over to the field house. We had a little bigger room to deal with, and eventually I got a student assistant coach. Terry Winkle might have been my first student assistant, and gave me a little bit. And it was a lot easier there, where your track was right outside the door, basketball court was right outside the door, had a student assistant that could go up to the football field. But whenever we ran two sports at one time, it was pretty tough. Yeah, and the thing that really was tough about it was the travel. I had to readjust my cross country schedule, because I had to be at every football game. So I had to construct a cross country schedule around our football schedule, and it meant a lot of time away from home. I marvel at my wife raised our kids, and there's no question about it, because I was just never there. I was always off someplace doing something at a basketball game or a football game or a cross-country meet or a track meet or something. And it was a period of time when coaches were multiple task type guys, as were the athletes in those days. The big difference that I see today one of the big differences that I see today with athletes of that era is the fact that they were all, literally, every athlete we had was a multiple sport athlete. In the 60s and 70s, almost every one of our football players ran track or played baseball or played basketball. Some of them did all three. Jim Vopat, I remember him, he did all three, football, basketball, and baseball. And Denny Donlinger ran cross country, played basketball, and ran track. And for him, that was a chore. But there were lots of kids like that were doing athletics because it was fun to do, and that was the thing that they got involved in, and they just had a great time with it. Where today you see so many more specialists earlier. You got kids today that are specializing in 7th grade. And I can only be a basketball player, or I can only be a track athlete, or I can only do this, or I can only do that. And we've lost something, I think, in that aspect of the athletic experience. I think there are things to be learned, skills to be learned, attitudes to be learned, social interrelationship that is different in a team sport like basketball or football or baseball or whatever, and an individual sport, wrestling or track and field or tennis or whatever. Yeah, they have can have a team concept or a team part of it, but it's not the same. And I think that having that experience in both kinds of sport settings was really important, and I think that helped our kids at that point in time a great deal. And I think every one of them would agree with me that it made them better. Because we had, I would guess that when Mr. Papik was the head track coach, almost every one of our football guys did something other than football. And it was the same way with basketball. Nobody really got too uptight about preseason or postseason or whatever, practice. Now, the season was over, it was over, and you were done. And that's pretty much the way it went for probably a 10 or 15-year period. I was, looking back on it, it went so fast. I just, it's just a jumble in my mind as far as, I know who did what when, but it really seemed to me like I was just racing from pillar to post, trying to keep up with the demands of the position. But we all accepted that. The coaches were multitaskers. Erickson was a football receivers coach and coached basketball at the same time, for part of it at least, through October 15th on. And and when Jerry Joy, later on when Jerry Joy came, he was our baseball coach and assistant football coach and assistant basketball coach. And so, you were going from day one in the fall to Memorial Day. And that was our school year, and you were going pretty much flat out the whole time. There was always something to do. There was always somebody to deal with. I think just trying to keep up and learn what was going on. For me, as a young coach, just trying to keep up was just about all I could handle. There wasn't any room for a lot of extraneous stuff going on. So that, those are the things that are different. I did have, I would say this, that we have some really great talents in that time frame. It started out with Skinner and White, and Dean was, an outstanding distance runner, the first NAIA athlete to score in the top 10 in the national championship meet all 4 years he was in school. And he's in the NAIA Hall of Fame now. Clint Skinner was a great sprinter. He ran second indoors to Brooks Johnson in a meet in Chicago. Johnson set the world record. Interesting story. This is probably 20 years later. I'm at a Learn by Doing camp at the USOC Training Center in Colorado Springs. And it's a camp where coaches were invited to come in and go through all the different events. And they had supposedly the best coaches known to mankind teaching each one of these events. And went to the sprint event and had a Doane T-shirt or something. Some guy looks at me and the instructor. And he said, Doane College. I said, yeah. He said, well, how's Clint Skinner? And I said, well, Clint's good. And he said, fastest college athlete we ever had in 1961. He said he gave me everything I wanted. He was the coach at Stanford at that time. And I just, these other coaches look at, what the heck is going on? And, but yeah, Clint was he probably the least appreciated of all of our outstanding athletes, because he was a heck of a sprinter from Elsie, Nebraska, a little school out west. And Pete was, Pete Sura was one of the greats in Doane, I think, in Doane athletic history. The way he got here is a long, involved story, and it would take a whole session. If we have time, sometime we'll get into that. But anyway, Pete came here from Germany and didn't speak any English or anything. And I remember his first semester, he had German 1, German 2, German 3, and track and field. That was his academic load. But very bright, super bright kid, and went on, of course, to have a great career in the banking business, and he was on our board of trustees for a number of years, and is retired now, lives in Germany, but he brought the concept of international, what it was like to be an international runner, into our program, and for a lot of our kids who were pretty provincial, and the coaches too. What did I know? I was, a Midwestern guy. I don't know anything about how the rest of the world works. But he brought the international concept of that was totally different from what we dealt with. I can still see him. First meet we ran at UNO and in Sap Field House, and they had a 10-lap to the mile dirt track in the field house, and Pete's running the 800, and they come wheeling off the last curve, and some kid from UNO is going to challenge him, and Pete gave him a pretty good shot. Put the kid in the popcorn stand. There's popcorn flying, and this guy's feet are sticking out, and they disqualified him, and he couldn't understand why. And of course, we had the language barrier, and he said, "Well, that's just the way we run in Europe," and he was right. I found a lot later on in my coaching career when I had an opportunity to coach a team in international competition. But that's pretty much the way it was. It's a survival of the fittest. And he brought that concept in. He brought some training concepts in that we hadn't thought about. And it's just dealing with a guy at that, who had been at that level, was a learning experience for me at least. And being able to and boy, did I make mistakes. When I think back on it, what we did for training was anything close to being adequate. But I didn't know any better, and it was a learning situation for me, big time. And I would say this for Coach Papik, when he dealt with his insistence, he let you make your own mistakes and learn from them, and he tried to help you to learn from them. It was he was a true mentor in that respect, that he didn't try and over administer you, but he wasn't afraid to tell you when he thought you made an error, and he did it in such a way that you didn't take offense, and that's what made him such a great coach. That's the way he dealt with the kids. It's the way he dealt with his assistants, and I tried to the best of my ability, tried to mimic that approach after I got to be head coach, because I thought his way of doing things was about as sound as anything. The one thing that I had never dealt with really was the recruiting aspect of it, and how important recruiting was. That I just had the idea that I guess that kids came to college and you dealt with whoever walked in the front door. And the idea of selling somebody on coming to your college was not anything that I had ever even thought about. And when I was at the University of Kansas City, I just put a sign up and said, tryouts are today. And whoever showed up, they were on the team, and whoever didn't, wasn't. And the idea of going out and trying to find somebody for a specific place on your team or a specific event was foreign to me, and I had to learn that. And Al did a great job of taking me along on his recruiting trips early, and just let me watch him do his thing was a great advantage to me eventually. I finally figured out that if you wanted to have a winning team, you had to have some raw talent to work with. You didn't have the talent to work with, you weren't going to win. It didn't make any difference how good a coach you were. Up until that time, I thought, I could coach anybody. And I was some kind of miracle worker, I guess, that could create something out of nothing. And I learned pretty fast that if you were going to create something, you had to have some raw material to work with. And that recruiting was the way you did that. And Al had the idea, had a really broad idea of recruiting. He wasn't a real narrow thinker when it came to recruiting. He would recruit literally anybody if he thought it would really help the program. And particularly, out of state. And you have to realize, of course, when you look at that point in history about Doane, we were struggling. This college was in deep struggling. We were 320 students and barely keeping our head above water. And looking for new opportunities to and new areas to open up for potential students. And Al used that situation to our advantage athletically, where said, okay, we had done a little bit of recruiting out of state. We had a contact in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and we had some kids from football players that had come from that area. But other than that, we were pretty much a in-state kind of recruiting program. And Al had the vision enough to see that we couldn't keep going that way, that we had to broaden our vision as to who we were going to try and serve and what kind of students we were at and where to find them. And it's a long, involved story, but the concept of out-of-state recruiting, whoa, was that something to sell to people to start with. And that period of time, that was in the 60s, when the civil rights activists, Vietnam War thing, that whole business was going on. It took a lot of foresight and a lot of courage for Al to bring a lot of African American kids on our campus. When I first came to Doane, this was a lily white school. We had one black kid on our entire student body. A fellow named Joe Moore was a football player and half-miler for us from Lincoln High. And he was the only black kid on this campus. And to bring, 10, 12, 15 minority kids into this part of the country to this kind of a college was quite a chore. And that took some courage on his part. And it took a lot of work and a lot of selling to make that happen and to make it function effectively. He was, and we were very careful about. He was really super careful about who he recruited and where they would fit in, whether or not they would fit in, and whether they were strong enough students to make it here. But yeah, he was a recruiting genius, really, and that's why he wound up at the University of Nebraska. They saw that he had that facility for student recruitment and recruiting the right students at the right time in the right place, and how to get them. And he was really I think he was a recruiting genius. I don't think any of it was really planned. Just the way Al Papik was. He was that kind of person, and he could his presence was such that you paid attention to what he was saying to you. He was great for me, obviously, for me to learn from him was a real opportunity. the and that probably his, well, I don't know, everybody talks about his coaching ability and the 38 in a row and all that, and that was great. He was a good coach, and that was a heck of a run. That was a lot of fun to be part of. Even just as a trainer, to be part of that run was a lot of fun. But I think his biggest contribution to this college was in the kind of people that he influenced to come here. And that was, I think that was a testament to his ability and the kind of person that he was, that he is today. The whole, people ask me a lot of times, how did we get all these guys to come in, the Fred Davises and the Larry Greens and that ilk of athletes, the really quality athletes, and that were African Americans, minority group. And how did this all transpire? And it's a long, involved story. Al decided, he and Bob Erickson, that leads me to another whole thing. That the other thing that contributed to Doane, that Al contributed to Doane, was he brought Bob Erickson on our campus. And Erickson was a high school basketball coach at Kearney High for a number of years. And we had a opening here as the head basketball coach, and Papik talked Erickson into coming and being our basketball coach. And our basketball program at that point was at probably about as low a level as you're going to find. Was not at a very high level. We weren't doing very well. And but Erickson came in, and that was a major impact, I think, athletically on Doane. And he was a great recruiter also. Well, anyway, and the two of them decide that we've got to go out of state to be competitive. That we can't compete with the low cost of the state schools. Kearney particularly was outstripping everybody at that point. In the 1960s, they were just killing everybody. And the basic difference was, of course, cost. And so a lot of Nebraska kids were drawn to Kearney. At any rate, to be competitive, we felt like we had to go out of state to find some people. And so they decided that they were going to mass mail. They got a hold of the Chicago Tribune newspaper, and they got the all state picks in basketball and football, and first team through whatever number of teams. And in Illinois, they have a classless system. It's a one-class system. Everybody's in the same class in high school, and so there's quite a number of people here, and they wrote to every kid. Didn't make any difference whether he was a lineman or a point guard or whatever. They wrote to him and said, "We see that you've done this, and we're interested in seeing if you would like to come out here and be part of our program," and so on. So this was a mass mailing. I don't even remember how many kids, 300 or maybe more. Well, anyway, one of those kids was a football player named Paul Broussard from Rantoul, Illinois, and never did hear anything back from him. We heard back from a few kids, and particularly from the Chicago metro area. And but Broussard, a year later, Broussard sends a letter up. He said, hey, he said, you guys tried to recruit me a year ago. I moved down to Port Arthur, Texas, and are you still interested in me? And so they back and forth. And sure enough, the kid shows up, and he's the real deal. And this kid is a 48 flat quarter miler in an era when 48 flat was pretty decent. And he was a good football player and running back, I think. And he's here a year, and they take care of him pretty well. He goes back home and tells his guidance counselor, hey, said, these people are pretty nice up there, and it's a pretty good little school. And so Al goes on a recruiting trip, and he goes out back east Chicago and Pennsylvania or wherever, Washington, D.C. Winds up down in Port Arthur, Texas, and he gets hooked up with a senior boys counselor, a guy named Clayton Clark, and they hit it off perfectly. I mean, you're talking about two guys that talk in the same language right out of the box. And Clayton was looking at that point in time, was looking for some opportunities for African American students to go to attend multiracial colleges, predominantly white colleges in the North. The opportunity for African American athletes at that point in time to compete at the collegiate level was limited pretty much to the all-black schools in the South. I don't think there was a single D1 school that had a single black kid on their teams. So the student has a choice of not going to college or going to Grambling or Texas Southern or Jackson State or Prairie View or Elkhorn A&M, predominantly black. In fact, they were all black schools, or not going to school at all. And so this gave them another opportunity to move into the secondary education to the next level. And Clayton was really good about he didn't want to send anybody up here who would fail. So he was very, very conscious of sending winners. And man, we lived off of that for a long time. And we get a little success and the thing grows like topseed. Then we got Chicago connection, and particularly at Marshall High School, and then later on in outstate Nebraska, outstate Illinois, Dixon and Sterling and Rock Falls and the Davenport area, Moline, and just the thing fed on itself after a little bit. We had kids coming in that were just fantastic athletes. The guy we just had here a month or two ago at the Doane Hall of Fame, Jim Welty, as good an athlete as you'll ever want to see. The guy was fantastic. And he was just kind of a run-of-the-mill recruit, and really, when he came here. And then we got, of course, the really good guys like Davis and Fred Davis, a two-time national champion, and beat the Olympic champion in the shot that year. And the Burl Williams, and we picked up a couple of basketball players from Evanston, Illinois, I think. And then, Larry Green and, the other Broussard, Alvin, and the Mike Sallier and Boo Baker, and, the thing just, once it got going, it was almost simple. It was so, people were so into this kind of a situation that, and it opened a whole new era in Doane College, and going through the turmoil of the civil rights era was a learning experience, and everybody learned from it, and Doane became a better school because of that influx of African Americans in our program, and athletics led the way. It wasn't that we were the only source of expanding our racial makeup of our student body, but the athletics led the way, and that was almost 100% Al Papik and Bob Erickson, and to be part of that and to try and learn from that was really an eye opener for me as a young coach, still trying to figure out what was going on. It was an era that I don't think will ever be repeated in college education and college athletics, in the development of collegiate experience for our student body, and getting a new and different look at, we had predominantly, and it didn't come easily. We had our problems as far as interracial, area, geographic area relationships within our student body. It wasn't all, well, people would like to believe that it was all, right now, and everybody accepted everybody at face value. It didn't work that way. And there were, it took a learning experience for predominantly white local Nebraska kids to accept out-of-state minority kids and on equal footing. And that took some doing, and it wasn't just as all sweetness and light. There were problems, but we worked through them, and everybody learned from them, and I think that was a major factor in creating a kind of campus and a kind of place that Doane College is, really. 'Cause we were kind of a one-way kind of school at one time, and this broadened it, and it was all, not all, primarily, in my opinion, because of Papik and Erickson and the way they approached their recruiting. It was a great time to be here. It certainly wasn't boring, and you worked, pretty hard at it. But it was a great time to learn about yourself and about other people and how you approach them and how they approached you and how they affected each other. Yeah.